this massive concentration of U.S. naval and air power that's building up around Iran right now. And the central question is this: is this unprecedented deployment a kind of strategic checkmate designed to fracture the Iranian leadership and force a new reality? Or is it a trap, leading inevitably to a catastrophic regional war that the United States just cannot win? I'll be arguing that this is a calculated pressure campaign designed to force a collapse.
And I'm going to argue that you're severely underestimating the target here. This isn't a checkmate. It's a huge gamble against a decentralized, hardened adversary that has spent 20 years preparing for this exact moment.
Okay, well, let's start with the scale of this move. President Trump himself described this as a greater armada than the one sent to Venezuela. But it's not just about the tonnage, right? It's about the specific strategy. This is essentially a decapitation model. The plan combines precision airstrikes on commanded nodes to paralyze the leadership in Tehran, while at the same time triggering internal fractures. We aren't just looking at ships, we're looking at coordinated intelligence support for internal factions. Groups like the Baluch Liberation Army, Kurdish forces, the MEK, to overwhelm the regime from the inside.
See, that entire strategy relies on the assumption that the regime functions like a pyramid. You cut off the top and the base just crumbles. But Iran has restructured its military into what they call a mosaic defense. They've built these self-sustaining underground cities in places like Mashhad and Fordo. And these aren't just bunkers. They are fully autonomous command districts. So even if you do strike Tehran, the country can split into independent military zones that are capable of fighting on their own. You just can't decapitate a hydra that doesn't rely on a single head to function. Plus, by, telegraphing this move for months, the U.S. has given Iran all the time it needs to prepare.
I see why you'd emphasize that resilience. But look at the intelligence dimension. That recent unrest we saw wasn't a failure. It was a tactic. It was shaking the tree. By activating those internal networks early, U.S. and Israeli planners effectively mapped the regime's response. They know now exactly which security units mobilize and where. That intelligence, it prepares the ground for those paramilitary forces to move in during the chaos of an air campaign. I think the regime is brittle, and when you combine precision air power with a multi-front internal uprising, that brittleness is going to lead to a fracture.
I think you're misreading that event completely. Shaking the tree didn't just map the network, it exposed it. It is highly likely that Iran used that unrest to identify and neutralize those specific U.S. and Israeli assets. The so-called brittle elements are probably gone. What you have left are the resilient paramilitary forces, the first team of the Revolutionary Guard, who are ready to crush any opposition. Expecting monarchists or the MEK to hold ground against the IRGC's heavy weapons is just wishful thinking.
Even if the military outcome is messy, the threat itself creates leverage. Trump has claimed Iran wants to make a deal. Historically, overwhelming force is often the necessary precursor to negotiation.
Deals. As the analyst Karine Kleisel calls it, that's just gangster language. You don't make deals in an existential fight for survival. If the U.S. strikes, Iran has the capacity to terminate energy production across the entire Persian Gulf. And we know Israel is reportedly prepared to absorb, 700 missiles? But Iran can target power and water grids to inflict near-lethal damage. We're talking about making Israel uninhabitable through infrastructure collapse. That isn't a scenario where you negotiate. That's a scenario where the global economy implodes.
You're focused on the worst-case retaliation, but you're discounting the technological asymmetry. We're talking about F-35s and B-2 Spirit bombers. The U.S. maintains a level of air superiority and stealth that Iran simply cannot match.
In a vacuum, yes. But this isn't a vacuum. It's a geopolitical minefield. Iran is a BRICS member. Russia and China will not just sit this out. They won't fight directly, but imagine if Russian intelligence helps Iran track and shoot down a B-2 bomber. That wouldn't just be a lost plane. It would shatter the entire myth of American air supremacy. That humiliation alone would be a strategic defeat.
Look, it is undeniably a high-stakes gamble. But this pressure campaign, it relies on the premise that the regime is under immense strain. And ultimately, this buildup, it might just be an off-ramp in disguise. It's a way for Trump to claim the threat of war forced a change without ever firing a shot.
I hope you're right. But relying on an off-ramp in the middle of a minefield is, well, it's incredibly dangerous. The military option looks less like a strategy and more like a trap.
The complexity is undeniable, and the consequences for global stability really couldn't be higher.
Indeed. One miscalculation could change everything.
Thank you for listening to the debate.